Defense Point 7 had been designed for a defensive squad, 6 to 8 soldiers with overlapping fields of fire, coordinated shield management, ammunition reserves sufficient for sustained engagement. Sergeant Marcus Webb was alone. The Velrathi 3rd Regiment was withdrawing in good order, exactly as trained, exactly as the retreat order specified. Staged fallback to secondary defensive positions, maintaining formation cohesion, preserving force integrity for the defense that would happen at the next line. It was the right call, tactically sound, necessary. But Marcus was looking at the tactical display and seeing something the retreat order hadn't accounted for. The primary Korathi advance route that would let them hit the withdrawing Velrathi forces while they were exposed, turning organized retreat into slaughter. Defense Point 7 had direct line of sight to that advance route, could provide suppressing fire that would slow the Korathi enough for the retreat to complete safely, if someone held it. His comm crackled. Captain Veris, his commanding officer. "Webb, you need to fall back now. Your position is about to be completely unsupported. The adjacent points have already withdrawn." Marcus checked his sensors. Veris was right. The defensive positions on either side of Point 7 were already empty, their occupants executing the retreat order. "I can see that, sir," Marcus said. "I can also see that if I hold for 10 minutes, the withdrawal doesn't turn into a massacre when the Korathi hit our forces during movement. But holding that position alone against the incoming Korathi force is suicide." Veris's voice was flat, stating a tactical fact. "You'll be overwhelmed in minutes." "Maybe," Marcus agreed, "but those 10 minutes matter more than I do. Give the order for full retreat. I'll cover it." There was a pause that felt heavier than the words that preceded it. "That's not an order, Sergeant. That's asking you to die." "I'm not asking for permission, sir. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. Get our people out." Marcus cut the comm before Veris could respond. He had maybe 90 seconds before the Korathi advance reached his position in strength. He used that time to reconfigure Defense Point 7's automated systems. Set firing patterns that would maximize coverage across the most likely approach vectors. Program the defensive shields to cycle in rotation rather than hold continuously. It would make them last longer against sustained fire. Prepared every system he could prepare for defending a position designed for a squad when he was alone. The first Korathi units appeared on his sensors. Marcus opened fire. On the Sovereign's Pride, positioned in high orbit above the battlefield, Empress Talindra then was watching the tactical display with the controlled frustration of a commander who understood she was losing this engagement. The Velrathi forces were fighting well. Her soldiers were executing doctrine properly. But the Korathi had better positioning, more forces, and momentum that had been systematically breaking through defensive lines for the past 3 hours. The retreat order was necessary. Sometimes you had to cede ground to preserve your forces for the defense that mattered more. She watched the withdrawal execute across the display, units falling back in good order, maintaining formation, exactly as trained. Then her tactical officer spoke. "Your Majesty, Defense Point 7 is still active, single combatant holding position." Talindra looked at the tactical display more closely. Defense Point 7's icon was still lit, still showing active weapons fire, still positioned exactly where it had been before the retreat order. "Identify the combatant," she said. "Human military advisor. Sergeant Marcus Webb, attached to 3rd Regiment." Talindra pulled up the detailed view of Defense Point 7. Watched the sensor data showing sustained weapons fire from a single position, engaging Korathi forces that should have already overrun it. "What is he doing?" she asked. "Covering the retreat, Your Majesty." Her tactical officer's voice carried the particular tone of someone reporting something they didn't quite believe themselves. "He's positioned to provide suppressing fire on the main Korathi advance route. If he maintains position for approximately 8 more minutes, our withdrawing forces will reach safe fallback positions." "If he maintains," Talindra said. He's alone against a force that will kill him in minutes. Yes, Your Majesty. Talindra zoomed the tactical display to show both Defense Point 7 and the withdrawing Velrathi forces. Saw the geometry of what Marcus was attempting. One position, one soldier, holding against overwhelming odds to buy time measured in minutes. She watched him execute fire patterns that were forcing the Korathi advance to slow, to take cover, to respect a threat that by all reasonable calculation they should be able to simply overwhelm. He's making them think he has support, her tactical officer said. The way he's cycling his fire patterns, the Korathi are treating him like a full defensive squad rather than a single combatant. How long has he been engaged? 4 minutes, Your Majesty. Estimated survival probability. Her tactical officer consulted the combat analysis systems. Initial estimate was 3 minutes before being overwhelmed. Current analysis. He paused. Current analysis suggests he's executing defensive doctrine that shouldn't be sustainable with a single combatant, but appears to be working anyway. Talindra watched the tactical display with absolute focus. Watched one human, in one defensive position, holding a line that should have already broken. Marcus had been in sustained combat for 7 minutes and was still alive, which surprised him almost as much as it clearly surprised the Korathi forces trying to kill him. He'd taken 2 hits. One his armor had mostly absorbed, left shoulder would hurt later but wasn't affecting functionality now. The second had gotten through, right side, something cracked or bleeding, hard to tell through the adrenaline and the armor's medical countermeasures. He was ignoring both. Processing pain right now would be tactically counterproductive. He was using every defensive tactic he'd learned across 12 years of military service. Constant position shifts within the defensive point, so the Korathi couldn't predict where fire was originating. Cycling between automated systems and personal weapons to create the impression of multiple defenders. Exploiting the terrain features that made approaching his position cost more casualties than the Korathi seemed willing to spend. He wasn't invincible. He was just making killing him expensive enough that the Korathi kept choosing to advance more carefully instead of committing the overwhelming force that would end this quickly. His ammunition counter was dropping, not critical yet, but getting there. His defensive shields were cycling on emergency power, maybe 3 more minutes of functionality before complete failure. He checked the tactical display showing the Velrathi retreat. 6 minutes until they reached safe fallback positions. He could do 6 more minutes. On the Sovereign's Pride, Empress Talindra was watching the same tactical display with an expression her bridge crew had never seen before, something between disbelief and profound recognition. He's been engaged for 7 minutes, her tactical officer reported. Initial survival estimate was 3. He's exceeding all projection models. He's using doctrine that assumes support he doesn't have, another officer added. Creating firing patterns that would make sense for a squad. The Korathi keep preparing for coordinated defense that never comes, which is slowing their advance because they're being cautious. He's buying time, Talindra said. The words came out quiet but absolute. He's paying for it with survival probability that approaches 0, but he's buying it anyway. 6 minutes until our forces reach safe fallback position, Your Majesty. Talindra watched Defense Point 7 on the tactical display. Watched one human hold a line that shouldn't be holdable. Make sure every officer in this fleet is watching this, she said. Record it, document it. What we're witnessing is. She paused, searching for words adequate to what she was seeing. What we're witnessing is the kind of courage that makes other courage possible. Marcus's shields failed at minute 9. The sudden exposure was immediate and total. Incoming fire that had been mostly deflected was now hitting his position directly. He adapted, using cover more aggressively, accepting that his defensive capability had just dropped precipitously, but that he could still make the Korathi pay for every meter of advance. His ammunition counter hit critical at minute 10. He switched to his sidearm, less effective, shorter range, but still capable of making the Korathi respect his position enough to advance carefully rather than rush. The tactical display showing Velrathi positions updated, retreat complete, forces at safe fallback. Marcus checked his chronometer. 10 minutes and 18 seconds since he'd told Captain Veris he would hold for 10 minutes. He'd succeeded. The withdrawal was safe. The Velrathi forces had reached positions where the Korathi couldn't hit them during movement. His mission was complete. The Korathi, apparently realizing the same thing and no longer constrained by the tactical value of caution, committed significant force to his position. Marcus's last transmission was to Captain Veris. Retreat complete, position no longer tenable, Webb out. Then the Korathi forces overran defense point 7, and Marcus's comm went silent, and on the Sovereign's Pride, Empress Talindra watched a single icon disappear from the tactical display after holding impossible ground for the exact amount of time it needed to be held. "Get recovery teams to that position the moment we can secure it," she ordered. Her voice was controlled but carried weight that made every officer on the bridge attend immediately. That human deserves to be recovered with honor whether he survived or not. The recovery teams reached Defense Point 7 3 hours later, after a Velrathi counterattack reclaimed the immediate area. They found Marcus unconscious but alive. His armor's emergency medical systems had stabilized him after the final assault, and the defensive point's structural coverage had protected him during the hours between being overwhelmed and being recovered. He woke 2 days later in the Sovereign's Pride's medical bay, treated by Velrathi military doctors who were simultaneously impressed by human physiological resilience and concerned by injuries that would have killed most Velrathi soldiers. The first thing he saw clearly was Captain Veris standing near his medical bed. "You're alive," Veris said. It came out somewhere between statement and question. "Apparently," Marcus said. His voice was rough. "Did the retreat succeed?" "Yes. Thanks to you. 0 casualties during withdrawal, if you hadn't held that position." Veris didn't finish the sentence. "The 3rd Regiment owes you debts we can't adequately repay." "Just doing my duty, sir." "That was not duty," Veris said firmly. "Duty is following orders. You chose certain death to protect forces that weren't under your command, and you executed that choice so effectively that it stopped being certain. That's something else entirely." When Marcus was stable enough for visitors beyond his immediate command, he received formal notice that Empress Talindra had requested private audience with him. The audience took place in a consultation room rather than any ceremonial space. Minimal formality, which Marcus's briefing on Velrathi protocol had taught him, meant this was personal rather than official. Empress Talindra was present with one advisor. She looked at Marcus with an intensity that felt comprehensive. "Sergeant Webb," she said, "I watched your stand at Defense Point 7 from my flagship. I watched you hold a position that should have fallen in minutes, against forces that should have overwhelmed you, for the exact duration necessary to save forces under my command. I was doing what needed doing, Your Majesty. My tactical officers have spent considerable time analyzing how you survived as long as you did," Talindra continued. "Their conclusion is that you executed defensive doctrine with a level of effectiveness that shouldn't be possible for a single combatant, and that you did so while maintaining the impression of greater strength that made the enemy cautious when they should have been aggressive." She paused. "You sacrificed your survival probability for an outcome you valued more than your life. That is not duty. That is character that cannot be commanded or trained. It either exists or it doesn't." "I made a tactical decision, Your Majesty. The mathematics suggested holding was valuable." "The mathematics," Talindra said, "suggested you would die in 3 minutes. You held for 10. That is not mathematics, that is will." She looked at him for a long moment. "I have commanded military forces for 15 years. I have watched Velrathi soldiers demonstrate courage under impossible circumstances. but I have never watched someone choose what you chose with such clarity and execute it so effectively. The Velrathi Empire owes you formal recognition and honors that will be conferred through appropriate ceremony," she continued. "But beyond that, I wanted you to know personally. What you did has been documented and will be taught. Every soldier in my forces will understand that one human stood alone against impossible odds to protect people who were not his species, and that his stand succeeded because he refused to accept that the enemy could pass." Marcus didn't know how to respond to that. "I'm honored, Your Majesty." "You should be," Talindra said, "because what you demonstrated, that single acts of courage under impossible odds can change outcomes, that one person refusing to yield can make the difference. That is the kind of example that makes other soldiers believe they can do impossible things." She stood. "You will recover fully, according to my medical staff, and when you do, you will find that your position within the Velrathi military structure has changed substantially. Someone with your demonstrated character and tactical capability is too valuable to remain an advisor. I just want to serve Your Majesty." "You did," Talindra said. "For 10 minutes and 18 seconds, you served in a way that saved hundreds of lives. The Empire will ensure you have the opportunity to continue serving at the level your actions have proven you capable of." Months later, when the engagement at Threshold Station had been fully analyzed and documented, military historians would identify Marcus's stand at Defense Point 7 as the decisive action that prevented the retreat from becoming a catastrophic loss. The 3rd Regiment that he'd covered during withdrawal would formally request that he be transferred to their permanent command structure. Empress Talindra would grant that request and simultaneously promote him to a rank that recognized his demonstrated capability regardless of his species or origin. The recording of his 10-minute stand, one human, one position, holding against overwhelming odds, would be incorporated into Velrathi military training as an example of effective defensive tactics under impossible circumstances. But what would resonate beyond the tactical lessons was simpler and more profound. The image of one soldier who refused to retreat when everyone else did, who chose to hold a line that mattered more than his survival, and who held it through will and skill until the people he was protecting were safe. The alien Empress and her forces couldn't believe what they saw, because sometimes strength isn't measured in fleets or technology or numerical advantage. Sometimes it's one person deciding the enemy goes no further, and holding that decision against everything that suggests it should break.